Hello guys, welcome to another episode of Manny's Reef. Last episode we talked about different sizes of tanks. We talked about the small tanks, the medium tanks. We talked about pico tanks. We talked about nano tanks. We talked about large tanks. We also talked about the monster size tanks, right? In this video, we're gonna see how all these tanks come into play in our home system. Without wasting much time, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So you've measured your space at home, or in your office or wherever you want your tank, and now you have an idea of what kind of tanks you have, or you want, what size of tank you want. You go to the store, you see the different types of tank sizes, so you look them up online and you have a rough estimate. Now you want to see how you're going to put your tank together. That's what we're going to be looking at in this video. We're going to look at how the different ways you can put your tanks together. There's different types of tanks. There's what they call the all-in-one tanks. So the all-in-one tanks are basically tanks that have all the systems in one. So it's basically a tank, and then behind the tank or beside the tank, depends on the manufacturer, they have a space where you keep all your filtration. It has all the filtration. You have if you want to use filter socks, they have a little section for that. So basically the water drains into the back filtration of that small section, and it's usually a really small section. But the good thing with this type of tanks is you can just have that one tank and you're good. You have the filtration. You can hide your equipment behind that little small box. The downside of this system is that the tank is so small, the extra space is so small that if you have so much equipment, you might not have enough space for it. Now if you have a big size heater, or if you want to put a refugium, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you might not have enough space for it behind this tank, right? So you have the all-in-one system, and what it does is basically the water drains from the main tank and drains into that little section we talked about, goes through all the whole filtration, right, and then comes back clean back into the tank. And that's what they call the all-in-one system. Some systems actually come with their own protein schemas. Some you have to buy a little hang on the back HOB protein schemas. But yeah, there's that configuration. Another configuration is to get a box, right? When you get this box, you can drill a hole on it, or you cannot, whichever one you want. When you drill a hole on it, you can get the overflow boxes that you can put where the water will drain through that overflow boxes and through the holes that you drilled down to what we're going to talk about in a minute. If you don't drill the hole, you can also get little what they call it, hang on the back external overflow boxes. That's what they call it. And basically it's overflow boxes that need continuous siphon, and it takes water out of your tank and drains it down to wherever you want. So two configuration with that setup is one, you can use a canister. You put a canister in my freshwater tank. I have my freshwater tank, and I have and it runs off on a canister. And the canister is basically like a small box. Usually ranges in sizes though, but it's a small box that has different levels of bio media, and different things that can help filter your water. So the water drains into your canister. It goes through all this biological and mechanical filtration, and then goes back up to your tank. You have that. The problem with the canister is if you have an open box using a canister, the canister is an enclosed system, so there's no space to put your equipment like your heater, and any other equipment that you have. You have to put it in your main display, which many people don't like because of aesthetics or because of fear that your fishes could actually burn your fishes, because some fishes would sit or rest or relax on whatever surface they find themselves. There's a heater there and the heater is on. There you go, you have a barbecued fish in your water. But usually heaters don't get that hot to they do, I shouldn't say that. But anyway, back to topic. So you have that canister, little small box. The water goes in the canister, goes back to your tank. Canister, because it's an enclosed system, you can't hide equipment in there. So you have to put your equipment in the tank. The second option is to make a sump. Now, a sump you can personalize your sump however you want, and different companies also sell sump. You can look it up on Google and find what companies sell sump. Or you can just make your own sump. You can get a and the good thing with making with your own sump is you can make it whatever size that you want. And a sump is basically a tank, usually smaller or bigger, however you want to go, than your main display tank. And what it does is remember how I told you the water goes through from your tank down through filtration. So your sump has different levels of filtration system, and you can also put your protein schema in if you have an internal protein schema, or if you have an external protein schema, you can leave that out. But your sump is basically a small tank that houses all your filtration system. Now, because it's an open tank, unlike the canister, which is a closed system, your sump has enough room to hide all your equipment, so you don't have to put them up in your main display. Like for instance, your dosing line, if you happen to start dosing, your heater, you can hide all that in your sump. Some sumps actually would have space for refugium. Most sumps have space for refugium, so you can make your refugium. Now, a refugium is basically in the ocean you have corals, you have fishes, and then you have plants, macroalgae. Corals are animals, we know. Fishes are animals, but these macroalgae, these plants are macroalgae are plants. And what they do is they help to clean up your system. They feed off of nitrate and phosphate and other elements to help reduce it from your main display, so your corals can live happy. So people can make a small refugium within their sump, put a light on it, put some macroalgae in there. I personally have an external refugium separate from the system, but you get the gist. The sump, you can personalize it to however you want. And then after the water is being cleaned, the water goes back to your tank. A different ways to set it up: you can set your water to drain from your tank, drain into your schema section where your protein schema schemes it, and then sends the clean water to your refugium section, and then refugium does its thing. And the refugium, besides plants, it's called refugium for a reason. It's called refugium because it's a place, it's basically like a safe haven to keep pods. Pods are like the little feeding guys that everyone feeds on in the ocean. So if the pods are in your main display, they'll get eaten by your fishes. But when they're in the refugium, there's usually no fish that eats you. Most people don't put fishes that will eat pods in the refugium, and that way they can grow and multiply and feed your main display, so that your fishes can have constant food or live food whenever they want. And that's how it works. So you can have the water flow through your refugium and then back to your return section. Your return section, you need a pump that will pump water from the tank or from the sump up back to your main display, and then you have that whole constant circulation. And that's how the sump works. And the canister we talked about earlier usually have like an internal pump that when the water drops, the pump sends the water back to your tank, so you also have that circulation. The only difference with a canister and a sump is that the canister is a closed system, the sump is open tank. Because the sump is big, you also have the advantage of putting as much media as you want. Unlike the canister, you're limited to how much media you can put. Of course, the sump, you're also limited to whatever space you dedicate to the media, right? But generally, you have more media than you would on a canister. Canisters also, like, because they usually like at the bottom, and the way it's set up, they usually house they require a lot of maintenance. You usually want to clean it more often than you would a sump. I clean my canister typically 3 times a year, but depends on your bioload of your tank. In my freshwater tank, the bioload is not that bad, so my canister can handle being cleaned 3 times a year. And basically you take it all out, and rinse the biomedia, not in fresh water but in tank water. Just give it a little quick rinse, clean up everything, clean up the canister, throw away the junk that has been storing up over the couple of months, and I put it back and let it keep running. Canisters usually will have like a small most canisters usually have a small UV light that helps with UV sterilizer. On a sump, however, you can get a bigger UV sterilizer and just connect it to water to flow from your sump to your UV back to your sump, or from your main display to your UV to the sump, or back to the main display. However you want that setup. All right. So now that we've talked about the sump, we've talked about canister, we've talked about the tank. Something I want to point out is the difference between tank size and your maximum your tank volume. Now, tank size is what we talked about in the last video. It's your pico tank, your nano tank. Tank size typically is the size of the tank that you keeping your fishes in, right? So if you have a 40-gallon display tank, well, your tank size is 40 gallon. As a matter of fact, by the time you add rocks, you add sand, with every addition of with everything you add to your tank, your water level decreases. So if you have a 40-gallon tank and you add 100 gallon 100 pound of rock, you won't have 40-gallon water. You might have 36, 35, or that you have to find out and see, do the math and see how much your tank volume actually is. Now, if you have a sump, your tank volume will now be your main display and the amount of water that you have in your sump. So if you have a nano tank and you want to have a bigger tank, but you want to have a bigger tank volume, water volume, but you like your nano tank, yes, you can keep your nano tank and just have a bigger sump, right? So now you have a total water volume of whatever. So for instance, let's say you have a 40-gallon sump, right? And your 40-gallon, you add 20 gallons of water. Well, if you have a nano tank of let's say you have a nano tank of 20, let's say you have 30 gallons, right? Or 20 gallons. Well, now you have a total water volume of 40 gallons because you add whatever your nano tank is to your main display, whatever your nano tank is to your sump, and that's how that works. So with that you can play with having more water volume, but you still can put a fish, because you have a total water volume of 50 gallon. Doesn't mean you should put a fish that should live in a 50 gallon to your main display, because your fish lives in the box, the space that you provide for them. So when you're calculating water volume to fish, you're calculating your tank size, which is the size of where they're gonna live, not the size of the total volume, if that makes sense. So that brings us to the end of this episode. So in this episode we learned different types of tank. We learned how to set up our tank. We learned about the tank and sump, canister. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any question on the topic, go ahead and let us know on the comment below. If you have anything to add, also please feel free to go ahead and add to the comment below. If you like the videos that you see, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. When you hit the subscribe button, don't forget to hit the little bell. That bell is what gives you notification of when your next video comes out. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate listening to you. Have a blessed day. Catch you on the next video. Bye.